morning. So today's post is more on the topic of surrender and letting go, and fighting. It's kind of this, we're in the middle of an interesting place. I spent a good portion of yesterday afternoon. I picked Tim up from his dialysis appointment, and we were on our way home, and then en route to come home they called him and said they wanted him to go to the ER because his calcium levels were really high, 14. It's typical for someone with multiple myeloma to have higher calcium levels because what happens is inside of the bone marrow where the light chains are being manufactured, at least this is my understanding of it, it's crowding out and causing like deterioration from inside of the bone itself and pushing that calcium out into the bloodstream. That's my grasp of it. So as the calcium leaches into his bloodstream, his counts go higher and higher. And that's actually, when he was initially diagnosed, it was because he had an alarmingly high amount of calcium in his bloodstream. I think that's how they also can detect osteoporosis, if you have bone leaching into your bloodstream. So anyways, en route to the hospital, we've been having these discussions about hospice and what does transition to hospice look like. And when you've been fighting so intensively for your life, and really like the numbers, everything hangs in the balance of these numbers. And when the numbers go off, you go and get some kind of treatment. Either they hang a bag or they run tests to see what bacteria is, swimming around in your body, and then they treat that. They give you blood. So right now, as we look to, I say we because a transition to hospice, it's an individual decision on the part of somebody who is choosing, whether they want to continue or not. But I observed this when my grandma, my paternal grandmother, died from pancreatic cancer, and she died in her home, and the hospice nurse was there overseeing her care, and our whole family was present at the time of her death. There was one family member, I believe it was one of her sons, who hadn't arrived yet, and she was hanging on and fighting to stay in her body until she could say her final goodbye. And he arrived, and he said his goodbyes to her, and shortly after she left her body. And when somebody's younger, there's a lot more that you're hanging on to. When you have a young family, I think your concerns and considerations for everyone that you might be leaving behind are pretty significant. And so, like, one of our daughters this past week was really having a rough time, and I could feel his peacefulness around his decision and his choice to kind of surrender, wavering a little bit. And we were just exploring that yesterday on our drive over to the hospital, because we knew that as soon as he got to the hospital, there was going to be a series of choices. And one of those choices might be, to land him back in the hospital, and then all kinds of treatment. But if his wish is to die at home, then a choice to go to the hospital needs to be carefully weighed. And so it just really was a lot of back and forth, and where are you snagged, and are you questioning your decision, and if so, why? And do we need to shift course with treatment? Do we need to resume oncology treatment? I think this week is a lot of kind of weighing all of that, weighing the prognosis because of the disease process, weighing out what treatment looks like, and also looking at what the reality of, like, as his numbers decline, his body deteriorates, and letting go of our bodily functions is really quite something. Lately he's had to give up driving. He's just having more shakes and tremors in his body, partly because of the calcium in his blood, probably for some other reasons. And it's just hard. It's hard to lose control. It's hard to let go. I think when I work with patients as a therapist, as an occupational therapist, like, our number one goal is to help that individual regain a sense of purpose and engagement in meaningful, purposeful activity. And at this phase, it's really hard to know, like, what is the meaningful, purposeful activity? When you don't have much function left in your body, or very little, and the function that you do have is questionable because, one moment you're doing fine, and then the next moment you're dropping glasses in the sink and on the floor, and they're breaking, and you depend on people around you to help pick things up. So the conversations that we've been having as a family, for our girls to be watching this, it's like a front row seat to the process of dying, and it's really a painful process, because you watch someone who was fully capable and, like, your anchor, like, bit by bit deteriorating. And I don't know if there's watching death, however it happens, is, we're hardwired to live, and we're hardwired to help the people around us live. And so it's really counterintuitive to watch someone die. And to watch them die slowly it's like you don't even know what you're watching. I mean, you're watching something that it, like, goes against the grain of everything inside of you to just allow this to happen. But you also know, we know what fighting looks like, and at this point we also know that his capacity to keep fighting is just not there. And so meaningful and purposeful activity, yesterday looked like just sitting next to him in the hallway at the West Bend St. Joseph's, or West Bend Hospital, in the ER, in the hallway, because they were overflowing with people. So we're in the hallway, and I kept having to move my chair, like, around his bed so that the gurneys and other things could get through. And I just held his hand and looked at him, and we just had a meaningful exchange. He was wearing a mask, and eyes said everything. He's at peace. He's not scared, but it still is like, it's something to let go. It's work. Because inside you start questioning everything, like, every decision, and it just feels like, in some ways, like wrong to be surrendering. But also when you're laying there and then you get poked, and then you've got someone mispoked you, and so then you have your arm blow up because there's like, they just missed the vein, and then it's really painful, and then you're reminded quickly of like what fighting looks like and how that feels. And so then the choice to surrender and the understanding that the time to surrender is very close at hand becomes more obvious. And so maybe our trip to the ER yesterday was a whole lot about like just a remembrance of what that place entails, what going to the hospital and being admitted entails. You become a lab specimen, and they have to check everything, and the questions that we answered at the point of intake, we answered the same questions 15 minutes later to the nurse. And when I said, we just answered all of these questions 15 minutes ago, she looked at me and gave me this look like, shut up, I'm the boss here. And she said, I know. And I work in healthcare, so I understand all of the protocols, but when you're in the middle of it and you're not feeling well, and our system is just really sometimes very inhumane. Yeah. And then the physician that came and sat beside Tim, he pulled up a chair and just sat next to him, and he was incredibly kind and humane, and for whatever she was lacking, he made up for. So that was good. But that's the phase that we're in right now. Is like, is hanging on and letting go, is fighting and surrendering. For me, it's supporting the process and asking the questions so that Tim can think through what he's deciding to be 100% sure in his decision. It's helping the girls understand something that's really hard to understand as young teenagers. And I'm also mindful in this whole process that this is a luxury, that many people don't have if life is cut short without preparation. If they're in an accident, if they're in a war situation, in a disaster. So I feel like we have this luxury of time to really explore what happens when, we mindfully, consciously surrender and hang up this body. I don't know what else to do besides explore it, because you can't, it's really awkward. Like, you can't plan for what's beyond it, because when you do, it feels weird. But then our girls, one of our daughters in particular, has just been like realizing that, oh, this means that Dad won't be at my wedding, and this means that Dad won't be there for this, and she just felt pretty angry about that. And I've worked with her over the past several days to just like turn towards Tim and share these things with him, even though they feel hard. share what your feelings, the feelings that you're having are, and allow him to be with you so that you can lean in and give him a hug when you're feeling so mindful of his absence, and this time in the future when you won't be able to hug him. Tell him what you want that dress to look like, and who you've decided might walk you down the aisle in place of your dad, because your dad won't be there to do that. And maybe you'll have a couple people walk you down the aisle, because it's going to take a whole lot of people to make up that combination of elements and qualities that make up Tim. So this is where we're at. These are our discussions. I share them openly and freely because I want anyone who's going through the process of death to really just look it in the face and just take each moment for what it is and make the most of it. Because when these moments are gone, they're gone, we don't have them again to do again. And we'll be on to other moments, and hopefully those moments are focused a whole lot more on living than dying, but right now, death is staring us right in the face. All right. Thank you, as always, for listening. And wherever you are in the world, I wish you